I think I may have a bit of a problem. I love RPGs, but right now I'm playing 9 RPGs concurrently on the Switch. That's 9 RPGs at once on the same console. Meanwhile, I'm also playing other games. What the hell are the controls again? On other consoles. Oh my god. Christ. It's no wonder I never finish anything. Those 9 games I mentioned, by the way, in alphabetical order, they are Child of Light, Fairy Fencer F, Advent Dark Force, Final Fantasy IX, Labyrinth of Refrain, Coven of Dusk, Octopath Traveler, Shining Resonance Refrain, Tales of Vesperia, Undertale, and Valkyria Chronicles. Now, what I'd like to do is review each of these games as I finish them in my own timely fashion, but I'd also like to rank them against each other so I can create this list of what I think are the best RPGs on the Switch. So, to get the list started, I'm going to talk about 5 games which I have by some miracle finished. Or should I say, finished with at least. Number 5, Saturday Morning RPG. It's the only unfinished game in the chart. It's not exactly bad, I just couldn't really be bothered getting to the end. It's a retro-style RPG split into several chapters, each themed around a Saturday morning cartoon. The combat is turn-based with active inputs for skills, a bit like Paper Mario. At the beginning of each fight, you have to furiously waggle the analog stick around to scratch stickers and earn buffs for your characters. One of the reasons I stopped playing is because I got sick of doing this. Every fight, I eventually decided it wasn't worth knackering a Joy-Con. I have a feeling the best way to play this game is probably on iPad. One thing worth mentioning about Saturday Morning RPG is the incredible soundtrack by none other than Vince DiCola. You may remember him from such film soundtracks as Rocky IV and Transformers the Movie. Here's a bit of the soundtrack now. The game has a light-hearted tone, although I found the humour to be a little hit and miss. Then again, what do I know? The back half of the game could be absolutely incredible, and I'll never know. Number 4, Phantasy Star. It seems odd to me that Phantasy Star never took off in the same way that Dragon Quest or Final Fantasy did. Maybe it's a science fiction thing. Star Ocean struggles as well, but that may have something to do with the past couple of entries being dreadful. Phantasy Star was released within days of the original Final Fantasy. If you compare the two games, the differences are quite shocking. Phantasy Star has detailed backgrounds for random encounters, enemies animate when they attack you, and there are even some scenes accompanied by illustrations to convey the game's story. The dungeons are presented as an Eye of the Beholder style 3D maze. Luckily, the Sega Ages version of Phantasy Star automatically maps these dungeons as you explore them, making it a lot more convenient to get around. Obviously, the game is super dated, having originally been released in 1987, but if you're interested in playing a bit of RPG history, then you may find it worthwhile. Number 3, West of Loathing. West of Loathing is funny. You can tell immediately from the look of it, and the quality of the writing becomes apparent very quickly. What takes a little longer to realise is that all the humour is actually wrapped around a rock-solid RPG. Combat is turn-based, but encounters are relatively snappy. You can choose how to develop your character as they level up, and the stats and abilities will often factor into dialogue choices and field actions. There are 3 playable character classes to choose from. My guy is a cowpuncher named Todd McFlurry. That's funny. In the starting town, you have to find yourself a horse and an NPC to partner up with. Again, there are multiple choices, as there are when resolving a variety of quests within the game, making repeat playthroughs an attractive prospect. I say check this one out. Number 2, Disgaea 5. Disgaea 5 is a strategy RPG, but only in the same way that Minecraft is a survival horror. Technically it's true, but it's not really the point. I'm sure it's entirely possible to employ strategy while playing Disgaea, but for me the series has more in common with Cookie Clicker, a slow grind which eventually spirals into chaos as the numbers grow out of control. The goal is to overcome your opponents, and how you do that is up to you. You can build your team however you want. Everything is customizable, from skills and equipment to names and colour palettes. The Disgaea games are developed by Nippon Ichi Software, which means they are extremely complex, although Disgaea 5 is the most refined game in the series so far, which you would expect. Items no longer have to be stored in a warehouse and are now sorted by category. Character creation has been separated from the assembler, meaning you don't have to seek approval to create genius level characters, and you can also pay to have new recruits start at any level, up to Killia's current level. The character world has been completely overhauled, quests have been introduced, you can send additional characters away on missions to earn items for you, you can cook curries which provide buffs for your party. In short, there's a lot going on. I haven't mentioned the story at all, and for me the story is always a bit of a weak point when it comes to the Disgaea series. Story events are less about advancing any kind of plot and more an excuse to watch a bunch of goofy characters bouncing off one another. There is a plot in there somewhere, but it's buried under a ton of asinine dialogue, which I could more or less do without. The Disgaea games have a very specific kind of appeal. They're not for everyone, but I've spent countless hours playing these games over the years, and Disgaea 5 is possibly the best in the series. Number 1. Xenoblade Chronicles 2 and its expansion, Torna the Golden Country. I bundled them together because even though you can purchase Torna as a standalone game, one really does complement the other, and if you're going to play either one, then I highly recommend both. Xenoblade is what you might call a hybrid RPG. Combat is not exactly turn-based, but it's not real-time either. It's more like an MMO. Your party will auto-attack enemies within range, and special skills are charged by landing auto-attacks. Battle strategy is based on combos, so who is in your party, what skills they have, and when you should use them are all things you need to consider. Enemies are fully visible while you're exploring the world, and you'll often come across terrifying opponents who can wipe out your party with a single strike. Luckily, there is no penalty for death beyond being teleported back to the last landmark you visited, and so exploration is encouraged. The world can seem cruel and confusing at first. Xenoblade 2 has a lot of systems, and Rex on his own is almost incapable of surviving an encounter with even the most timid wildlife. But with some patience, you will find that the systems become familiar, and as your party grows, the world opens up to you. And what a world it is! The environments in Xenoblade 2 are fairly massive, with plenty of variety and lots to discover. It also sounds amazing thanks to the beautiful soundtrack, with many locations having separate arrangements for the day and night time. Speaking of sound, I have to mention the voice acting. You can download the original Japanese voices if you like, but I'm happy to play in English. I'm not sure exactly how to describe Rex's voice. It's some version of a northern accent, but it's like nothing I've ever heard in real life.
What are you talking about?
I'm aware some people hate it, but for me the real ear splitter is Tora. Speaking of the characters, I really like the cast in this game, especially Nia, the Welsh cat girl. She's cool.
What the bloody hell is this?
The story is a pure concentrated dose of anime melodrama. I grew up on this kind of thing, playing games like Grandia, Final Fantasy VII and Skies of Arcadia, so I'm well up for it. If, like me, you find yourself getting attached to these characters, then there are plenty of emotional high points along the journey. Again, all bolstered by the incredible soundtrack. Of course, there are some stupid moments too, some more stupid than others.
Handling a man's turtle!
My only real criticism of the game is on the random nature of the blade system. Blades are your allies and your weapons in combat. Blades are born from crystals, but before each blade is born you must choose a character to bond them to. But since you don't know what you're going to get, it's a matter of pure luck as to whether rare blades will be bonded to characters who can actually make good use of them. Blade bonding is permanent, although there are a very limited number of single-use items that allow you to transfer ownership of a blade. It's annoying at first, but by the end of the game you have so many blades and your options are so expanded that it doesn't really matter. Xenoblade 2 is a huge game that you could easily play for 100 hours before you even get to Torna the Golden Country. The expansion is much like the main game but refined in several aspects. The biggest improvement is the combat system, which now sees blades and drivers switching place with each other throughout the encounter. It feels a little more active than the main game and is a joy to play. Also, the new battle music is the best you're going to hear outside of a Persona game. The story in Torna has a much smaller scope than the main game, but it does illuminate past events in an interesting way. I recently started a second playthrough on Xenoblade 2 and I'm finding new significance in characters that I basically ignored the first time around.
Well, I'll be. It's just one blast from the past after another today.
In my opinion, Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is a treat for RPG fans. Like I said, it's a bit anime in certain regards, which may be off-putting for some people, but if you can embrace it, then you will love it. I guarantee it. Not a guarantee. So there we have it, the Switch RPG chart as it stands. Number 5, Saturday Morning RPG. Number 4, the Sega Ages release of Phantasy Star. Number 3, West of Loathing. Number 2, Disgaea 5. And at number 1, Xenoblade Chronicles 2 plus Torna the Golden Country. I can't wait to expand this list with whatever game I finish next. I get the feeling it will probably be Theory Fencer F, even though it's pretty mediocre. Anyway, thanks for watching and I'll see you next time. Bye!